So I read this book recently. It's called Stolen Focus. It's a really good book. It's written by he's a journalist and a novelist, so it's a really enjoyable read, while also still being very research based. And I also like it because he takes the time to also acknowledge, hey, this research, there's other research that kind of contradicts it. So, but here's why I think this one's right, or this research is kind of new. So it's very forward about that. So basically, what it is he had realized he'd lost the ability to focus, he'd lost the ability to create, and he'd lost the ability to write. Like he just couldn't get in that mental state to do those things that he always enjoyed in life anymore. And he wanted to figure out why. And so he starts on this journey that he was fortunate enough to be able to do, where he was going to do a 3-month fast, where basically he's going to isolate himself in this cabin pretty much, and no technology except for really old laptop with no internet so that he could write. And then along the journey, he realizes it wasn't just about turning off the device more, that there was other things that were happening internally that he needed to address in order to really get his focus back and be able to be productive like he used to be. And so I enjoyed it because I was having a similar struggle where it was like almost like things that I used to really enjoy doing, or being able to get in the creative state where if you've ever hung out with me and you can tell I've had too much coffee and I'm spewing insane ideas, kind of lost some of that. And it kind of made me a little nervous, and I wanted to be able to get it back. And then also just some enjoyment in certain things. And so I just started wondering. So I read the book, and it taught me some cool things. And so a lot of this comes from that, and I'll be sharing some more things. But one of those big things is just if you find yourself and you just can't focus like you used to be, or also you're not finding as much enjoyment as you used to in certain things, like whether that's engaging with students, getting in a flow and trying to create lesson plans, or just having those creative lesson ideas, or maybe just some other things, personally outside of school, hobbies. It's just some stuff to consider that I thought was really eye-opening and worth a look. So, so there's a few hard lessons here that I kind of had to learn. The number one is that multitasking is a myth. And I'll explain why this ties in here in a second. This will set some things up. So I used to think that, I was superpower brain, and with more caffeine, it was even more superpower in the sense of, hey, I can do a billion things at once, but you can't. You literally only can technically do one thing at a time. It's just how we're built. And so, and in the book, there's some research, but you can kind of see, I'm not saying these numbers are exact, but basically it's like, it's not that you can split your brain. It's like when you try to split it, you lose a lot of things. So as we try to multitask, we are just not as engaged as we could be or should be. And then we're also just not as good at anything as we think we should be or definitely can be. And so we kind of have to let that go. And the reason this is important, I think, is that just realizing if you are supposed to be doing one thing and then you're getting pulled away to, out of your own control, really look at your device for some reason, then it's greatly affecting your enjoyment of daily activities, from work to personal life to relationships, but also affecting productivity, creativity, all those kinds of things, and just overall kind of brain power. And one of the things that was eye-opening that got me realizing this was, if you've ever watched The Social Dilemma, and the guy who produced that documentary, he actually invented Gmail, basically, along with the other team. And so he was realizing that this was happening to him because of Gmail, and that they were doing this to others. So if you realize that the Gmail app, boring old checking your email, is designed in such a way to pull away your focus and to catch you looking at it more often than you probably would want to or need to, and to trigger your brain and your body to think, wow, I need to check that. Then you just think about these other things that we also talk about and do. They're on our devices and these media download streaming things we like. So something to realize, that multitasking is a myth. So when we have these things pull us away, it's a problem. The second thing is that task switching gets you drunk, okay? Not literally, not like in the fun way, for those of you that are into that, but, or high. It lists high too, but not in our state. So anyways, here's the thing. So it's not so much like it puts you in a weird mental state, but it basically robs you of the same amount of brain power. It puts you in the same ability to kind of focus, problem solve, and think. So it takes that much brain power when you're task switching. So what that means is, let's just say, for example, I'll stick to work for right now because, I don't need to know your personal business, but you sit down you've got a planning day, a conference period, and you're like, I'm going to get into lesson planning. And then you get a push notification and you need to look at your email, or you just get that urge that says, I want to look at this thing, or it could be social media, wherever the case may be. That switching and then going, oh, wait, I'm supposed to do this, and going back and forth. It's steadily every time you're doing that, or even if you get off task and then get off different things that are off task, every time it's reducing that brain power, similar to the same effects of being drunk or high. And so while we think, oh, I can go into this and pop right back into that, it doesn't happen that way. And so we steadily lose our brain power and our ability to focus and do those things. So the last thing here is, and this will all tie together, I think, is that distractions cost us more time than we think. So when we get pulled away, it's not just that I went away and checked email for a few minutes and I came back on task. Those interruptions actually still like 23 minutes. Now, there's different, I'm sure, research and science and situations, and each of us is different. So the number exactly is not important. But what's important to realize is it's not just about the time you come off of something and come back to it. Then it's trying to get your body back into, and your mental kind of state back into what you were doing. And then eventually, hopefully, getting into like this creative flow. So they talk about how, and I'm sure most of you know this, and you've sensed it at least, you start doing something and then something builds on something else, and then it's all of a sudden like everything clicks and you're like, oh, now I have this idea, and now I've got this excitement, this passion, and I want to go do this thing. Creative lessons, for example, okay? Or getting ahead of grading and lesson planning. So those different states that we get into. So when we get off task and then come back and get interrupted, it's not just the time we lost, but then now we've got to get back into that state. And so it's kind of talking about that process. And so just realizing those things, like, well, we think it's a little thing. Yeah, I'm at a boring meeting. I've been through this meeting before. I've seen this presentation. This is my good class. I can trust them and I can sit down and take a break. These things are actually bigger than we think. They're taking more time than we think. They're affecting our mental focus and enjoyment in life more than we think. And our brains actually aren't capable of trying to do both things. Like, we can't sit there and be in a state of, I'm here, and then, you know what, while I'm doing that, I can also be ready to help and do those things. Those things don't happen. So this is something I want to encourage you with, just kind of as an action step. And there's other things you can do, and I'd be happy to talk to you about a lot of them. Like I said, I've been doing a lot of reading about this recently because I realized what it had done to me, and it reached a point where it was almost scary of like going, hey, these things I used to be able to jump in and do. It's really hard to motivate to do them, and my brain doesn't seem to want to do it the way it used to. So first action step, I would just say, is to try turning off all your push notifications. Now, I will tell you, I still have them on for the messaging app. Actually, like texting, I don't know if you can actually even turn those off, because I get that's like an emergency type deal. I could also see other messaging apps, things like GroupMe. I'm not talking like your Facebook Messenger, but I'm talking about things where if it's a standalone app that, you know, could qualify as an emergency type situation. So, for example, we use this Talkatone app, and it allows our kids to text, and so for free to us. And so anyways, there's things like that. But other than that, turning off your push notifications, Gmail, Facebook, Twitter, all those things. And then out of that, retraining yourself to go, you know what, I know I'm going to check these things. You've got to check your email, but can I do it on a schedule? Because what happens with these push notifications is it also builds in this reward sense. So if you've, taken freshman psychology, you learn about Pavlov's dogs and the bell rings, and then we get treats and rewards. That's the same thing that's happening. Like, they literally hire behavior scientists to train them how to code and program things in order to get reactions out of us in the exact same way. And so it's about retraining yourself to go, you know what, now, because sometimes, it gets where you don't even need the notification. You just feel like you want to go look and get that little reward, that little bump, that dopamine hit, whatever the case is. And so to retrain yourself and be like, you know what, I'm only going to look at it at these certain times, and maybe write it down. I'm sending a video out to students tomorrow talking about similar things. Like, take the time, turn the push notifications off, and then retrain yourself. And you say, you know what, I'm going to only look at it during this time on this schedule. Email's important. I'm going to check it at 10 because I've got conference, noon because I've got lunch, and then like 3:30 at the end of the day right before I leave, just to make sure I'm caught up and didn't miss any parent stuff that I didn't know about. And then just be able to do those things. And then, like I said, social media, maybe you're like, you know what, I do need to do it less. And so I'm going to block off this time, and then I'm going to set a timer to make sure that I stick to that. And so I encourage you, turning off push notifications, kind of writing down like what's the new habit, what's the new schedule. And then even, if you wanted to as a team, kind of talk about it and be like, hey, this is what I'm doing. What are you doing? We can make it a competition. We can just check on each other. And then just start to think. And I can tell you, it is hard. You will catch yourself wanting to do a check. That's one reason why the thing I did last week, if you want to go back and watch that, if you didn't, talking about how to rearrange your phone so it makes it harder to get to these things. But I can just tell you the level of engagement that I had in activities, the change in kind of brain function was huge just by disabling these things. Now, I will tell you it was easier for me because I don't have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I'm not on social media. Gmail was my, drug of choice along with YouTube. And so, granted, it was two things. It was easier for me, probably. But I do know there was a huge difference. And it was hard, too, because then I'm like, also, in the next step, I was like, well, this feels good. Let me see if I can train myself how to just stand in line and not have to look at my phone and just kind of be silent and just sort of look around and then notice other people. Or, sitting in places and being like, this is not the most engaging thing, but going, I'm going to be engaged and I'm going to do this whole hour, which, sitting still is hard enough for me. So just something to think about and encourage you. Realize that the reason the push notifications tie in is these interruptions are a problem. They build into this idea where we think we can multitask and do more things at once, which we can't. And the problem isn't just the time. It's that it takes more time than we think. It gets our brain out of whack, and then we have to have time getting it back into focus, and the fact that we're steadily losing the brain power that we need, which equates to less time, more stress, and also just kind of starting to rob some of that joy. And so if you're sitting there going, I don't enjoy some of these things as much as I used to. Even, let's say I'm not enjoying teaching as much as I used to. Stop and think, are there things like this that are robbing that joy? And then you get rid of those things and start going, wow, this is great. I do like doing this. And now I have more time that just again begins to snowball even more enjoyment. So sorry that was a little longer than I expected. It's a lot to think about. But again, I've noticed a huge difference in just turning these things off and then kind of retraining myself to be like, okay, when am I going to check these things and how am I going to go about it? And even, what are some, new habits I'm going to set to make sure I still don't miss things that are truly important, but also that I'm not just checking just because I have this urge or this habit of thinking I'm supposed to just all the time. All right. If you need any other ideas, if you want to talk about this, if you got more questions, let me know, and I would love to chat about it.